Welcome back to Taiwan On with Jon. I'm Jon Hazlett of the Ashland Fly Shop, and today we're going to tie a modern version of we'll call it a classic, a fly that I tied, oh gosh, it was probably 2002. And a little backstory here, I worked at the Ashland outdoor store when there was a fly shop in it, and the owner of the store at the time was Steve Rowe, who passed a little over a year ago. And when Steve passed, we got a couple flies back of his, and two of which were a couple that I had tied for him back then. And what they are is some early attempts of mine at an intruder type fly, and they incorporate bucktail and turkey flats. So here's a purple chartreuse version, and then here is a black and chartreuse. So we've got turkey flats and bucktail. So we're going to do a modern version of that, which looks something more like this. So here's a modern version of it. We've got turkey flat and bucktail. And the turkey flat I'd gotten from Mike McCune, who came down and do a spay clinic for us. And so Mike brought some turkey flats that he had dyed in purple and black, which are in those two flies I just showed you. And so a lot of my early intruder type fly attempts were with turkey flats, and I still incorporate turkey flats in a lot of my flies. So some of the key ingredients of the modern version of what we'll call it the Bucktail Intruder will be, of course, turkey flats, and in this case, in the version from Hairline, which they call the Intruder Feather Prop Hackle. So there's that guy there. Of course, bucktail, and then we will use EP Senyo's Chromatic Brush. Brushes are great behind the hackle, and or the EP Craft Fur Brush. Here's a sample from Hairline here. Craft Fur Brush. So those are some key ingredients, along with OPST's Steelhead shanks, and they have their Steelhead shank and their Intruder shank in a variety of sizes. So we're going to tie, like I said, the modern version, and we'll tie it this is kind of the standard format here, and then we'll do a super mega articulated 3-stager. You can see the articulation there, and then we'll also tie a mini one. So thanks for tuning in, and enjoy. All right, folks, so we're going to tie the Bucktail Intruder, and the pattern we're going to do is this, and this pattern you can do a variety of different color combinations, but we're going to do the blue chartreuse, and here we go. So got a little thread on the shank. This is my OPST shank, and the first thing I always do is put the lead eyes on. And so with the up eye, I'm going to put the lead eyes on the bottom. I always put the lead eyes on the bottom because that will help the fly ride properly. So I like to make a little cradle. So I just build up a little thread like so on each side of where the lead eyes are going to hang out. Get these guys on there. I don't have to super crank them on there yet. I do want them secure, because we are going to also put the trailing wire around the lead eyes. So step 2, trailing wire. Before I put the trailing wire on, I just like to run the thread down the hook. Gives the trailing wire something to grip. Now you can use, there's several different trailing wires. Senyo's Intruder wire is really nice. It's a coated wire. In this case, I'm using 50-pound Fireline, which is kind of hard to find these days. So when I put my trailing wire on, I want to make sure I have enough room to set the hook after the fly is tied. I don't put the hook on ahead of time, the trailing hook, because I find that I poke myself. So from the very back of the fly to where I'm going to slip the hook on, I need enough room to slip on this number 2 owner. So I've given myself enough room. That's measured out right. Believe me, I've tied flies before where I don't give myself room and I can't get a hook on. You spend 20 minutes on a fly, it's a tragedy. So give yourself enough room, and where that hook will end up is right under the end of the bucktail. So when I put this trailing wire on, I like to put my strands around the lead eyes. You can see how end of the strand goes around the lead eyes and back. That's just added security. I've never had one pull out. There's enough thread wraps on this, you could just run it down the shank. If you don't use lead eyes, if you just run it down the shank, it is not going to slip. I'm using Vivus 140 power thread, and this stuff, you really can't break it. If you're just getting into tying these bigger bugs, you know, make sure you use a heavy enough thread. Breaking the thread is no fun, and these are not finesse flies, so I'll use the big fly thread sometimes, but this Vivus 140 power thread's awesome. Okay, so that's secure. Our first move is we're just going to make a little ball here out of, you can use Estas or just some sparkly chenille of some kind. And I just want to make a little prop for my bucktail, because that bucktail is going to go over the top of this, and this will just kind of prop the bucktail up so it kind of flares up a little bit. Okay, now I've pre-cut everything here to make this go faster, so I've got it looks like a pretty good clump of bucktail, but I always grab it by the tip. I'll just kind of pull out the smaller ones and make those go away. So as far as the length here, this is going to just go past the end of where the hook is. So hook's going to come to about here where my finger is. So that's just the right amount, just past the end of the hook. So I've got it pinched off, and it's going to go on top. I'm going to do a couple loose wraps just to make sure I like where it is. Yep, I like where it is. Keep it nice and secure. A couple tighter wraps. I'm going to grab the part that I'm going to cut off, and I'm going to just go behind it. A couple wraps behind it. Now I can cut that off. When you use a good heavy thread, you can really reef on it, and you actually limit the amount of wraps you have to do. So I'm going to just put a couple more on there. See how that flares up? That's going to look awesome when we get done with this fly. So on top of that, you know, there's a lot of ways to put flash in flies, but I just flash out the tail. So I'm going to do a little flash that extends over here. I like this crinkly flash here. We carry this in the shop. Variety of colors. This stuff really reflects light. Got about 6 strands in here. Flash is one of those things, it's kind of personal preference. I could put no flash in this fly and it would look good. I could put a ton of flash in it. Sometimes I think too much flash can kind of take away from the appeal of the fly. So a couple strands in the top there. All right, just do a little cleanup here before we tie in our turkey flat. Okay, And one thing you can do with flash, if you put it in a little long, that's fine. You can always trim it later. So here's our intruder prop hackle, which is a turkey flat, and I've already pulled off all the fuzzy stuff. And I've got just about an inch, maybe 5/8, 3/4 of an inch worth of barbs here. So get that guy tied in tip first. And these wrap pretty nice. They like to stick to each other, so I'll kind of separate them as I go around, pulling it back. And you can really make your flies sparser or a little heavier dressed, just depending on how much bucktail you put in, how much of that turkey flat you end up putting in. Okay, so the body's pretty easy. We're gonna put some pearl tinsel in, but we are gonna secure it with a little wire, a little French tinsel, a little small wire. So just a couple wraps there. Now this wide flat pearl tinsel is really cool, really reflective. Get that fairly tight to that turkey flat. And then the key is I want the thickness of the body about the same, so I will just eyeball it as I work it back towards the head. That way when I wrap my tinsel on there, it looks nice and even. And I want the black thread under that pearl tinsel. I'm tying another version, or I'm using a different color thread. Just make sure you just cover it all up with whatever color thread you're using. Okay, I like to cut this extra long, so when I'm wrapping this thing, it doesn't come out of my grip. And you can actually do this pretty tight without breaking it. So I'm wrapping it pretty tight, overlapping it itself by about a half. And it's hard to get it perfect where you first start turning it from the turkey hackle there, turkey flat, but you know, this fly is not going to go in a shadow box on the wall. This fly is going to get fished, so this part doesn't have to be perfect. What we want is just iridescent, reflective glow from the middle of the fly. I could have left it a little longer. Okay, so couple to secure, one behind for insurance. Trim that dude off. And then when I secure it with this small wire, I'm going to go in the reverse of the way I turn the tinsel on there. Now if you're really OCD, you could have put some kind of adhesive under it, over it, you know, but that is not going to come undone. That's going to fish. It's going to last the life of the fly. That's not going to come undone. Okay, got that part done. So we finished the rear of it. The body is real simple. And then I'm going to grab this brush. This is the blueberry color, which is really cool. It's got a little purple in it, blue. This is Senyo's Chromatic Brush, made by Enrico Puglisi. Make a lot of cool brushes. This basically is a substitute for doing a big dubbing loop. This is the poor man's dubbing loop, and it's a time saver. And you know, one thing about my flies is they're not technical. There's no fancy, expensive materials in them. They're kind of blue collar, Spartan, you know, whether it's one of these intruders or some of the other bugs I tie. Nothing fancy here, so I like to take blue collar materials and make them look as good as I can. So I did about 3 turns here, and I just kind of want to fill out this, just kind of cover a little of the body, but you still want to see the body. So that looks about right, about 3 turns. And I'm going to secure this guy. Now this brush has a wire that's twisted around all the fibers, so I use a good pair of dikes here to cut through that wire. Okay, I got that done. And before I move on here, I will take, I use a toothbrush, Oral-B, and just kind of comb that out like so. Okay, starting to look like a fly. All right, we're on the home stretch here. So in this case, I like contrast in flies, so I could have gone blue and blue for my turkey flats, but I'm going to do black up front. There's plenty of blue in this fly. So I'm going to do black up front. And just like the rear hackle, tie it in with the tip. And one thing about these tricky flats, they love to run wild, which is cool. Each fly kind of has a life of its own. Okay, we got that secure. All right, so all I got to do is finish this guy. And one note here before I finish this. If I want to add a little extra to this fly, notice in this guy, I did a little guinea hackle. I'm not going to do it for this one, but if you want to add a little more contrast, a little more bugginess, you know, every fly is different. You can tie it however you want, but if you do a little guinea hackle here, you can add a little extra to the fly, a little extra accent. I personally, for this fly, just like it how it is. So we're going to finish it right here. So I'm going to do a few half hitches. If you do, you know, whatever knot you use to finish a fly, I do a few half hitches, break it, done. And then we use a lot of loon products here in the shop. So this UV clear fly finish works great. This just happens to be the UV version. I'm going to put a little bit here and there, and then just to activate it, to cure it, use our UV light, and it cures up real quick. Just give it a little turn. And that's all it takes. So there is the Bucktail Intruder. Thanks for tuning in. Time to go fishing.